Welcome to my channel, The Binge Eating Therapist. I'm Sarah, former binge eater turned psychotherapist, and my mission is to use this space to bring content to you to help you understand your struggle with food and break free from binge eating. Now, today's video was a request that was made after I did the video about how we can look at binge eating recovery differently. And I talked a little bit in that video about setting intentions, and I was asked if I would go into this in a bit more depth. Particularly around what are the intentions you can set after you've binged that are going to help you get back into balance. Now, I've done another video about 5 things you can do after a binge. I'll link to it above. It's actually my most watched video, and I recommend you probably do watch that video first because there's 5 very practical things and some of the information's in that video, and then we delve into it a little bit deeper in this one. So firstly, I want to say that how you respond after a binge is absolutely crucial in whether it sets you up for the next one or not. Some of the mistakes that people make over and over again is that they binge, they feel awful, but they make all these promises to themselves about how they're going to do things differently tomorrow. And they put their head on their pillow at night, making all these promises about, okay, I'm only going to eat this, or I'm not going to eat that tomorrow. And so you're falling asleep with these restrictive thoughts in your mind. That can lead you to, I think it leads your body to responding as if restriction's imminent, because the body anticipates, and there's a whole body-mind connection going on. So I think your body then wakes up anticipating restriction. And also after a binge is the time when you are probably most motivated to restrict, right? You're not having to deal with any binge urges because you've just binged. You've remembered how awful it feels, so you believe that that knowledge of how terrible this feels is going to be enough from preventing you from doing it again. But I'm sure you understand what it's like, the fact that you're here, that's often not the outcome. A lot of the time, the things people are saying to themselves aren't just realistic. We think we can change our behaviour by simply saying to ourselves or deciding we're just going to change our behaviour. We're just going to be different around food tomorrow, despite the fact that the last years or however long have taught us otherwise. We live in that hope. So yes, there is this often feeling of despair or hopelessness after a binge, but sometimes we swing into this really kind of hopeful, motivated place because we're not in conflict at that point. The part of us that doesn't want to whinge I'm going to leave that in. The part of us that doesn't want to binge is active, so we're like, I don't even know why I did binge, but I'm just going to make sure that I don't do it again. And it's disheartening to find ourselves in that situation again, and it destroys the trust we have in ourselves. So we have to do something differently. We know that whatever you've been doing at the moment after a binge, whatever you've been saying to yourself, isn't working. The black and white thinking tends to come in a lot here as well. So we make these big, grand promises about what we're going to do, and then we catastrophize it and feel utter despair when we don't do it. So the thing is with setting an intention is that we are deliberately looking for the grey. Because the grey is the middle ground. Between black and white, you've got grey. Being in control and out of control with food, you've got balance. So balance is in the grey. And for us black and white thinkers, sometimes it's quite hard to find the grey. And sometimes even when we find it, it doesn't look very appealing because we miss the highs of feeling in control, or that promises that we can transform our bodies and finally emerge as the people we were supposed to be. But this thinking's dangerous. And it's the lie that keeps people stuck in eating disorders, in the binge eating cycle, keeping people feeling dissatisfied with their bodies as well. So what really helps us to reduce our binge eating? If I'm going to really oversimplify this, sort of for the purpose of this video, I would split it into 2 things. One is not restricting. That helps not to binge. We know that restriction can drive binge eating. And on the other side of it, we've got that not being present. Because in order to binge, we have to kind of switch off part of our brain. Our executive functioning switches down. It's why we feel like we're in this trance state. We're not really in control of our behaviour. We're numbing out all of that. So I think we need to start with the restriction stuff first. So any intention you set after a binge, you've got to really look for any kind of sneaky restricted thinking in there, because that could set off your brain or your biology to push you into binging. And on the other side of things, like how do we be more present? I don't think this is a problem exclusive to people struggling with binge eating. I think the majority of people struggle with this, with just being present in our lives. We live a life that is full of distractions all around us. You know, even if we're standing in a queue in a supermarket for more than a minute, we've got our phones out, or we're scrolling through social media. And from a neurochemistry point of view, what they think is going on is we're getting these dopamine hits all the time. And certain foods give us stronger dopamine hits as well. So when suddenly nothing's happening, or things seem a bit grey or a bit meh, we can experience that urge to binge, and it could even be a drive for dopamine. So learning how to be more present, to live a more present life, is a huge thing, way beyond the scope of one video. But I think it's a crucial part for a lot of people if they really want to overcome binge eating. But I think we're human beings. I think we're prone to distraction and getting caught up in our thoughts and our emotions. I don't know how possible it is to walk around in a complete state of presence. You know, we've got distractions everywhere. But then what happens is when all the distractions stop, we panic. We call it boredom. We say we're bored. We eat because we're bored. And actually, we're unstimulated, and we're searching for that stimulation. So developing the capacity to be able to be quiet with our thoughts, even for a very short period of time, even if we can only manage it for 5 minutes a day, will really help us when it comes to reducing those urges to go unconscious with food. So I'm going to share with you several intentions that you may choose to use yourself. Have a pen and paper handy. You can jot down the ones that you like. Try them on. See how they feel. That none of them are going to work for everybody, and there'll be some that will appeal to you a bit more, and it's about finding the ones that actually resonate with you and support you into breaking out of the binge cycle. Some of them are to do with food itself and how to eat, and others are nothing to do with food at all. And so I have written them down because otherwise I will forget them all. So I'm going to read some of them. So one of the questions that often comes up around binge eating recovery is, should I be planning my meals? There are some programs out there that really push the whole food plan thing, and you're supposed to plan every bite of food you eat, and anything you eat that's not on plan is a compulsive bite. Now, I don't think that suits many people. I tend to ask people, does having a plan like that make you feel freer? That's all I want for you. I just want you to feel free around food. So if that genuinely makes you feel freer, try it out, crack on. But I find for most people who struggle with this, it doesn't. It makes them feel more confined, and that rebellious part and the part that wants to be free to make choices and change our minds can be triggered by a really strict food plan. But having some kind of idea of what you're going to eat tomorrow after a binge could be really helpful, because you're likely to wake up a bit tired or sluggish. Your mood might be lower, you might be still feeling a bit stressed out about last night's binge, and trying to make food decisions from that emotional state may not lead to the kind of decisions you would like to be making. So I think it's helpful to have a rough idea, a rough plan of some really delicious and satisfying meals that you know you usually enjoy. The problem is with a lot of you, when you plan food, you think that if you're planning it, it should be super quote unquote healthy. It should be a little bit in a deficit as well, because you really do want to try and reduce your weight and change your body, all of that. But that's where you've got to watch out for the restrictive thinking when it comes to planning, but having an idea of what you would like to eat, but remaining flexible if another option comes up that appeals to you even more. And the next one is one that I shared before because it was one that I used a lot, and that was, I can eat whatever I want, I just have to do my utmost to enjoy it. That's it, that's the only condition. Because when you are in the cycle of binge eating, you are not enjoying the food. It maybe the first couple of bites at a push, but when you're really in the cycle, it's something else. It's a whole other beast. It's not enjoyment. So I found that by giving myself permission to eat what I want, that protects against the restriction. But the condition is I have to do my utmost to enjoy it. That's what's trying to force me to stay present with the food. That I found really helped to balance me out. Another intention that might work is to say that I am going to eat without any distractions. So this can be a lot harder than it sounds, and I wouldn't don't make this a black and white thing where you say like, from now on, I'm going to eat without distractions forever. If you're just looking at trying to get yourself back into balance, just say like, for the next 24 hours, everything I'm going to eat, I'm just not going to distract myself. If that feels too much, because like the noise or that critical voice in your head is just yelling at you, then a kind of compromise around that, or a grey area, would be to eat while listening to something but not looking at anything else. So the idea being that you look at your food. Our visuals is such a big part actually of our satiety system, and us knowing how much we've eaten, so it tends to make us more satisfied. The research shows when we eat in front of the TV, we eat, I can't remember what the number is, but a lot more than when we don't. So having that something to listen to that you can focus on whilst resting your eyes on your food can be a way of starting to connect and be a bit more present, because presence doesn't have to be turned into a black and white thing either. It's not this 100% mindful eating, checking in with your body with every bite. If you want to do that stuff, then great, but if you set yourself up to do that perfectly, you may end up feeling like you failed if you don't manage to do that. And the next intention is kind of, there's two here that are sort of opposites of one another, so you can try them out and see what works for you. For some people, making sure that they eat a breakfast that they normally enjoy is really helpful. It keeps them into their rhythm of eating and helps them get back into some kind of structure. For others, and this is what I did, was after binging, I would set an intention to wait until I felt my hunger before I ate. And the reason for that is I found if I woke up in the morning like still feeling a bit full or unwell from last night, and then I ate again, it tasted like cardboard and I felt really dissatisfied. And for me, dissatisfaction was a trigger to binge, so I found that a really stressful experience. Whereas if I just waited until I felt a whisper of hunger, and it wouldn't even have to be a physical sensation. I think one of the best ways of knowing if you're hungry is that a wide variety of foods are appealing. So I would simply wait until a wide variety of foods were appealing, which meant that when I did eat, I could feel satisfied. And that was just something that was really important for me. Now you have to be really careful with this one, and it actually does go against a lot of advice that nutritionists and dietitians might give as well, because you can, like, the whole sneaky restrictive thinking can be like, oh yeah, I'll do that because then I'll eat less. Your intention behind your intention is really, really important. You know, it's not about whether you are eating or you're not eating, but your reasons for it. So for me, it just helped me to feel more in balance, but I've worked with people for whom it absolutely doesn't suit. For them, having the breakfast is what helps them to feel a bit more regulated the next day. And then the next one kind of tags on to that one and could simply be, I will connect to my hunger. Now again, this is not about letting yourself go hungry, but it's about saying to yourself, okay, tomorrow I'm going to find somewhere where I can connect with hunger, where I can feel my hunger, so that when I eat, I have some hunger to satisfy. So it's not allowing hunger to continue. The minute you feel it, you satisfy it, but it's about trying to feel it, because, you know, I've been in cycles before of months of binge eating where I've not felt hungry once. And that's been really hard to regulate for me if I don't get in touch with my hunger. I find it really hard to know how much to eat, and I end up just feeling out of whack. So this is not only eating when you're hungry, not by any means, like maybe just once in a day, trying to get in touch with the physical sensation of hunger so that you learn to recognize it, but also you can have that satisfaction of fulfilling the call of hunger. And so those are the ones specifically related to like how to eat. And for me, that's what intention is really about. It's not about what you eat, but more about how you eat. Because binge eating is not just eating a lot of food, it's feeling completely out of control, it's feeling cut off from your body, it's, for a lot of people, like feeling physical discomfort afterwards. So it's not about what you eat, but it's about how you eat it and how you feel about that. And I think if you focus on that, you're kind of focusing on how you're thinking and feeling. And I found when I do that, the actual behavior, which is the choices made around food, tend to take care of themselves well enough. So the next ones are intentions you can set that are nothing to do with food, but I've found they have a knock-on effect on binge eating, because a lot of them are about kind of connecting with life, with people, with the moment, and being more conscious of what's going on within us. It's about staying conscious, I would say, a lot of these. So the first one is I will connect with whoever, insert a person of your choice. Binge eating is one of those problems, like it pulls us so much into ourselves, and it's so all-consuming and overwhelming. Like, I have felt like I don't want to exist because of my binge eating in the past. And to anyone who's not struggled with it, that sounds really dramatic. If you've struggled with it, maybe you can relate to that. So by doing something for someone else, whether it's checking in with someone and seeing if they're okay, whether it's doing something for someone that you know is going to bring them some happiness, it kind of pulls us out of our own experience. It connects us to the world again, to people in the world, and helps us bring in some perspective. Now, this is not to shame ourselves for experiencing this, and this is not a comparison thing about, oh, you know, our problems are no big deal. It's not that at all. How we feel is enormously important. But it just enables us to step outside of ourselves, step outside of this overwhelming problem that just consumes our thoughts all the time, and just helps us recognize our value beyond what we're eating. And another one that I found, and still do find, like particularly useful, is to set an intention to spend a bit of time with myself. Now, basically kind of looping back to what I was saying before around, we find it really difficult to sit with ourselves and to sit with our minds. So therefore we end up trying to run away from ourselves all the times and distract, and food can be a way of doing that. So whether it might be deciding to spend 10 minutes in meditation, or doing a bit of breath work, or doing some journaling, or going for a walk without your headphones in, or even just drinking your cup of coffee in the morning in silence while you gaze out the window, whatever it might be, but finding a moment of stillness with ourselves and being able to create that stillness. Because I sometimes think that binge eating, because like the thinking shuts off, it's almost a way of creating that stillness because we're fed up of the chatter in our minds. So if we learn how to create that stillness away from the food, perhaps the compulsive drive to reach for the food may reduce. Another one I quite like is that I will keep checking in with how I'm feeling. So you might have just binged, but kind of saying like, okay, for the next 24 hours, I'm just going to set some reminders on my phone. I'm just going to check in and go, okay, what's going on for me now? And if you don't know, you don't know, but you just set that intention to pay attention, and you may start noticing things that you didn't notice before. There is so much going on inside of us that is outside of our awareness. So if we're willing to stop and look and ask ourselves what's going on, we may start to see things we haven't been able to see before. The next one is I will watch the self-talk. So we've got that voice in our head that's narrating our life, that's judging everything we're doing or saying, everything everyone else is doing or saying as good or bad. When we develop the capacity to watch that voice and try and separate ourselves from that voice, it's just mind chatter, but we identify with it and we think it's who we are, and we think that everything it's saying is true. So this is particularly prevalent when the emotions are up around binge eating. All we can think about is, you know, food and what we should or shouldn't be eating and how terrible we are and how do we solve this problem, how do we stop doing that. But when we can step back and look at what we're doing, that's what kind of brings us real mastery actually over our experience, so that our minds don't keep running off with us. So just setting that intention, and that the journaling is really helpful with that actually, just a couple of times a day, sitting down and just writing out what's going on in your mind, because when you get it outside of your brain onto paper, or even if you speak it out loud, then you can observe it, you can look at it as the observer and go, gosh, look at what I'm saying to myself. A lot of the time people are kind of aware they've got a critical voice in their head, but they're not aware just how mean it can be until they consciously pay attention to it. And the next one is, I will have a gentle structure to my day. So it may be that your day is already structured out for you through work or whatever, or you may be somebody who has to structure their own day and decide when they're going to do this job or when they're going to do that. So having some idea of structure and how your day is going to be can be really helpful. We don't do very well with uncertainty, and structure's been found to be really good for mental health. We kind of know what's going on. So I see all my clients on 3 days, and then I have 4 days where I do all my other projects. I do my YouTube stuff, or I do writing, or whatever it might be. So I have to structure those days myself. So if I structure them beforehand, and this is a gentle structure that I can be flexible with, then I find that much easier than waking up in the morning and trying to decide as I go along when I'm going to do what. That leads me down the road of procrastination. And eating can be a way of procrastinating as well. A lot of people make that association. And then the last one is to get outside in some green spaces. So we know that being around nature, or plants or birds or trees, whatever it might be, are really good for our mood and helping us feel a bit calmer. Being outside in the natural light really helps with our serotonin levels. The air outside is much higher quality for most people, depending on where you live, than the air inside, so that's really good for our bodies as well. And just moving around outside too can help us feel a little bit calmer. And I've often found that when I've set myself that intention, as opposed to, right, tomorrow I'm going to go for a 10k run to burn off that binge eating, and you're trying to run when you're just so full and uncomfortable still, it's very different. It comes from a very different place than like, I'm going to go outside because I'm going to try and lift my mood. Because looking after our mood and our emotional state will also really support us when it comes to binge eating recovery. So that was quite a long one today. I hope it was helpful. Let me know if you've got any intentions or any things that you say to yourself after binge eating that help you to get back on track. I'm interested in collecting some of these up and sharing them around to see which ones might help who. And if you try any of these out and they're useful, let me know your experience. Okay, well, thanks for being here, and I will see you on the next video.